I have found this battle to be one of the most remembered in American history. It seems to have one of the handful of battles that even kids who flunked history in high school can remember and get right and know something about it, even if what they know is incorrect, but they know something about it. And even nationally, in traveling to other countries, people say, Montana, oh, that's where Custer was from. And that's the beginning of a conversation, a lot of times, a surprising conversation. So this is a battle with international significance. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was June 25th, 1876. It had been building for days, weeks, and months. The climactic actions of the battle were a few hours that afternoon. Leading up to it was a struggle over land, as most of these Indian wars have land at the base of it. In this case, the 1868 treaty at Fort Laramie between the United States government and the Lakota Nation had recognized the Lakota land claim to most of western South Dakota and additional lands in Montana and Wyoming. And that was fine in 1868, but a few years later gold was discovered in the Black Hills, and the United States government decided it wanted to renegotiate that treaty by force if necessary. And that's what the Army was out here doing today, trying to compel the Indians to come into the agencies and renegotiate that treaty to concede more of their land. Custer attacked, came from the east here, crossed over into the valley of the Little Bighorn, had a long ride that day. He was trying to be sure to catch the Indians before they found him, discovered him, and he was afraid they would disperse if they did see him first. So he was aiming for a surprise attack. He had a problem in that he had the long drive. He would have preferred a dawn attack, but that wasn't possible. And so it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He split his forces into 3 groups. One attacked, one did scouting to the south of us, and Custer himself and the largest body of soldiers maintained their position on the ridge here overlooking the valley and overlooking the Indian village. Custer's actions have remained somewhat of a mystery, and that's part of the ongoing mystique of the battle. But from the Indian point of view, they met an attack from one direction and then moved to face this potential attack from Custer over here on Last Stand Hill. And that's where the dramatic conclusion, at least for Custer, that's where he died. Well, after the battle, Americans cried for revenge. There was a new round of fighting that lasted in fits and starts for the rest of that summer and into the fall and the winter, until finally by the next spring, Crazy Horse and the largest band of Lakota went to the reservation. Sitting Bull took a smaller number of Sioux with him north to Canada, and so the United States government did in fact get its way. The treaty was renegotiated, and Lakota were forced, illegally most people conclude, to concede a large part of the Black Hills. I say illegally because that is still in the courts to this day under contention about the ownership of the Black Hills. I think the biggest misconception about the Battle of the Little Bighorn is the name that's usually applied to it. Custer's Last Stand suggests Custer was fighting a defensive action that day, when in fact he was attacking a village, and the Last Stand has been really questioned by recent archaeological evidence and by seriously accounting for the Indian narratives of the battle. So that changes the feel of it from Custer's Last Stand to really the last stand of the northern Plains Indians, the last major victory for northern Plains Indians. In addition to the myth of the last stand, one of the myths is that Custer was overwhelmed by superior numbers, that he was surprised and then overwhelmed by superior numbers. And of course there were a lot of Sioux and Cheyenne warriors here that day, more than he expected, but not that many more than he expected. So the idea that he was overrun by superior numbers is a bit of a myth. They actually outfought him that day. They were better fighters on that day. They were more aggressive, more spirited, and they had had Sitting Bull's vision that told them that heaven was on their side, that this would be their day, their moment in battle, and they believed that. They felt the righteousness of their cause. And so that confidence and fighting spirit is what did Custer in more than numbers. I approached writing this because I thought the mythological story had been well told and believed by mainstream Americans, by the students in my classes, for instance. And I wanted to tell a different story, and to make sure that the variety of perspectives were told and were felt vividly. I approached that with great trepidation because I was telling other people's stories. I'm not a military man. I was telling the stories of military men, not just Custer, but the soldiers who fought for Custer. I was telling, I am not Native American. I was telling Native stories. So I was using my historian's objectivity, but also a historian's empathy to try to tell a story that would help readers experience some of the emotional content of those 19th century struggles. I start the book with Crow perspectives and attitudes towards the battle. They were surprisingly disappointed that Custer had lost, because they were allies of Custer that day, fighting against what they saw as Lakota intrusions on their land here in eastern Montana. The Lakota participants in the battle were defending themselves, their way of life, their ability to follow the buffalo and remain free, Indians, not subservient to the United States government. And so I tried to pick up as many of those perspectives and those voices as I could. From the perspective of the United States Cavalry, I tried to say something about the experience not only of the officers, people like Custer, but also of some of the soldiers. So I looked for soldiers' accounts to include in the story. For instance, there's a young man named Windolf who was Prussian, and he moved from Prussia to New York to escape service in the Prussian army. Found himself poor in New York, not speaking much English, and followed the advice of someone who said, join the army, you'll learn English and you'll have a job. And the next thing you know, he was riding around the Montana hills, in his words, looking for Indians, hunting Indians. And he was kind of surprised to be here. He survived and left a rich account of that experience. The Battle of the Little Bighorn is exciting to me because it is one of the things that one of the points in history when people get excited, angry, mad. People will yell, people cry about what happened over 100 years ago. It is a story with extraordinary power, both for some people to confirm American manifest destiny and the essential rightness of American westering movement during the 19th century, and for some people it is a story of great tragedy and pain, because it is a reminder of the suffering that Native people experienced during the 19th century, of the lands that were taken. And so it still is a very powerful story from any perspective that one looks at it. And it's a battle, I should add, that is becoming increasingly more interesting as the United States pursues wars such as Afghanistan, where instead of massed armies such as World War II were fighting hit-and-run guerrilla-like strategies, and that resembles this battle much more than, say, World War II strategies. So people in the military as well as popular culture is paying more attention to this kind of, this part of our history. I would like people who read my book to take away a sympathetic understanding of what Plains Indians experienced during the late 19th century, of the pain and trauma of those years, but also of the complexity of history, that this is not simply a morality play where, like so many Western movies, some good guys ride in on wearing white hats and some bad guys right away wearing black hats, or that kind of thing, where the characters are complex and there are good people in a wide variety of positions and some bad people in a variety of positions, and most people who are sometimes good and sometimes bad. It's not easy to make these snap moral judgments. There were, for instance, many Sioux who judged that their best interests lay with cooperating with the United States government. The Crow Nation, as a general practice, decided that their best interests, the way to maintain their homeland, were to be cooperative with the whites who were coming into their country. So there's a great, as I say, variety and complexity in the kind of responses to encroaching white society and white government.